sweet of you. Very nice. All right, Dave Dulio is here. He's the director of the Center for Civic Engagement and Political Science, professor at Oakland University. We're going to talk about the tariffs, the whiplash, big cuts at the Department of Education, and the general scene. And Professor Dulio, always a pleasure. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks for having me back, Paul W.
The tariffs, they're very confusing to most of us, and yet we then hear that inflation is down for the first time in, I think, like 4 years. It's a little confusing.
It is very confusing. I think that's part of you use the word whiplash, and I think that's a good one to use. I think that there is so much happening in Washington, across the country. There are so many changes and reforms that are taking place through the executive office of the president that it can be dizzying in some ways. I think the confusion, however, over tariffs, I would say stems from two things. Number one, a lack of sort of true information about what tariffs are and how they work. I also think maybe more importantly for our politics is I would say that the White House has not done a great job messaging about these tariffs. And what I mean by that is they haven't explained the long-term strategy very well. I think what we hear and what we get caught up in is, there's going to be a tariff on this country or that country for this particular set of goods. And then, we're backing off. And then, this country's putting a tariff on us, right? It is this whiplash of changes and shifts that I think if the White House would explain to the public in a longer form way their plan, their strategy, I think the public reaction might be a little better than what we're seeing.
I have to agree with you. There has to be some more explanations. I know that the president feels, and correctly, can make a lot of these decisions on his own, doesn't need to ask anybody anything or explain anything, but he should, given the way the American people are acting and reacting to some of these things. Some people are just saying, go for it, baby, do the things that nobody's ever done that we need to have done. But I want to back up just a little bit, Professor Dave Dulio from Oakland University. You were saying something, I'm not quoting exactly, but something about that you're not sure everyone has the true interpretation of what tariffs are or what they do. I'm backing up to let you give us your view on what you say is the true interpretation.
Well, I think number one, I'm not an economist, so this is a
I know, but you're a very learned guy,
right? Tariffs. I think part of the reason for that lack of information is that Trump is the first president in a long time to use tariffs as a broad strategy in trying to impact other countries' behaviors, right? So tariffs are these costs that are paid for by the country that's sending something to us. Those tariffs are collected by usually a company on this side of the border, and then that money is paid to the general fund of the United States government. That piece of it is relatively simple, yet I think goes largely unknown by many in the public. I think the strategy behind it, look, I think a lot of the things the president does fall in the category of a negotiation tactic, right? He is clearly trying to get a reaction from Canada, Mexico, China, you name it, right? When he's imposing tariffs, talking about tariffs. And to this point, we've seen some of that work. But that's also part of that longer-term strategy that I think needs more attention if the public is going to stick with Trump, right? He is at a high point in his job approval. He could barely get into the 40s in his first term. He's over 50 now, but it's going to be tough to stay there if he doesn't do a better job explaining so that he can have some of those doubtful voters who are seeing their 401ks go up and down with the market. He's got to keep them if he's going to have success later in his term.
You know, Professor, it gets me that he's doing to them what they've done to us without any repercussions forever. I've always noticed when I've gone off around the world to these various auto shows and such, how much more difficult it is for us to sell our cars, American-made cars, in these other countries than it is for them to sell their cars in our country. So when he announced or said or explained, hey, whatever they charge us, we're going to charge them, seems very fair when you look at it that way.
It does, and I think that can be a winning, or at least a majority winning message, right? I mean, that message of fairness and what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? I mean, is kind of where he's going with it. That I think could, if messaged right, could prove popular.
And he just has to message it right. Director of the Center for Civic Engagement and Political Science, professor at Oakland University, Professor Dave Dulio, sharing his expertise with us once again. Thank you, Professor. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Paul W.
We continue in focus at 12:29 on WJR.